Ja Morant just got traded to a team already loaded with guards, and he's the one who decided to break the silence about it. He sat in front of reporters and started naming names, the players he's about to share a locker room with, and what he thinks is about to happen once they're all on the floor together. Portland didn't just bring in a two-time All-Star. They brought in a guy who's now talking, in his own words, about exactly how he plans to change what this team looks like. Las Vegas Summer League week. Ja Morant walks up to a small group of reporters wearing a black polo with a Trailblazers logo stitched over the chest. And it's the first time the public has heard from him since the trade. Morant said the offseason trade from the Memphis Grizzlies to the Portland Trailblazers will give him the chance to start fresh and prove that his bad guy image is a misconception. That's the setup, but it's what came next that turned heads. Morant was walking into a talented and guard-heavy roster. That includes Damian Lillard, Denny Avdija, Drew Holiday, Scoot Henderson, and Shaedon Sharpe, 5 other guys who play his exact position or close to it. And instead of downplaying it, instead of pretending it wasn't a strange fit, Morant leaned all the way in. Though Portland appears to have a backcourt logjam, Morant said he was willing to start or come off the bench, and he expressed excitement about playing with the likes of Lillard, Holiday, and Avdija. Here's the part that made people sit up. Morant had already spent time with several of his new teammates that week in Las Vegas, and he said all those guys will most likely unlock new parts of his game, and he'll do the same for them. He wasn't just being polite. He went further, addressing the exact concern every analyst in the country had raised the moment the trade broke. How do you fit 4 ball-dominant guards on one roster without stepping on each other? Morant said he doesn't think it will be a problem having all of them on the floor or making sure minutes match up because they're all very unselfish. That's Morant talking about Lillard, Holiday, Avdija, and Henderson in one breath, on the record, days after arriving. Now flip it around. What were they saying about him? Start with Lillard. Before Morant had even landed in Portland, the Trailblazers dropped a video on their team account. Lillard, sitting there in Blazers gear, looked into the camera and delivered a message that the whole fan base replayed instantly. "Ja, what's good, bro?" Lillard said. "Pleasure to have you, man. Welcome to Portland. Let's get to work. Let's do it." Short, direct. But it appeared that no one was more thrilled about Morant joining the Trailblazers than Damian Lillard. Second voice, the new head coach Micah Nori. He didn't just welcome Morant. He made a point of telling reporters what he'd heard about him before the trade even happened. In an interview by Jason Quick of The Athletic, Nori revealed that Morant promised to be at his best possible self in Portland, saying the way Morant was talking, the way he looked, the intent he had. You could tell in his face that he missed basketball. Nori then dropped the line that got clipped everywhere. He told Morant about the background he'd done on him, and that people had nothing but great things to say about him, not only as a player, but as a person and a teammate. That all his teammates love him. Third voice, the front office itself, relayed through reporting the same week. Shams Charania revealed that the Blazers spoke to Morant shortly after the trade, and he expressed to them that he was excited to be in Portland. 3 separate camps, the star point guard already in the building, the brand new head coach, and the front office that pulled the trigger, all putting their read on Morant out in public within the same 48 hours. And then there's a 4th angle nobody expected. Portland's own fan base reacting in real time to what this all meant for the roster. Once Portland revealed its intention of keeping a loaded backcourt with Morant, the belief circulating, per The Athletic's Jason Quick, was that the 4 guards could coexist ahead of the 2026-27 season. But the reaction underneath that reporting was blunt. One fan called it a nice way of saying they believe they can patch together 82 games between 4 injury-prone guards, while another said believing 4 guards can coexist is peak copium, adding it feels like throwing talent at the wall instead of building a real roster. So within days of the trade, you've got Morant naming his new teammates and predicting chemistry, Lillard publicly rolling out the welcome mat, a coach revealing he vetted Morant's character before ever coaching him, and a fan base split down the middle about whether any of it can actually work on the court. That's the chain reaction, and it all traces back to one trade that, on its face, looked almost too small for how much noise it made. The Blazers traded forwards Jerami Grant and Chris Murray for the 26-year-old Morant, who was the 2nd pick in the 2019 NBA draft. 2 rotation pieces headed to Memphis for a former All-Star point guard. On paper, it reads like a bargain. In practice, it set off a conversation about locker room chemistry, playing time, and exactly what Morant meant when he said certain teammates were going to unlock parts of his game nobody had seen in years. To understand why Morant's comments landed the way they did, You have to go back to what he was walking away from. This wasn't a guy getting traded off a bad team looking for a spark. This was the last man standing from a core that was supposed to define the next decade of Grizzlies basketball. Since the Grizzlies emerged as one of the league's most promising young cores during the 2022 playoffs, they had traded Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Desmond Bane, and watched Dillon Brooks depart via free agency. That team was built around a young core four of Morant, Dillon Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Desmond Bane. And now they're all gone. Brooks played only one more season before changing teams twice. Bane went to Orlando the summer before, and Jackson was traded to Utah in February. By the time Morant was sent to Portland, he was the last remaining member of Memphis's young core. The on-court decline is only half of it. Things changed quickly after Morant received an 8-game suspension from the league in March 2023 for displaying a firearm on an Instagram livestream, then a 25-game ban to open the following season. He wound up playing 79 total games over the last 3 years, while the core of the team around him slowly broke apart. Add to that a moment that got far less national attention but mattered plenty inside the building. The Grizzlies suspended him for 1 game in November because of a heated confrontation with coach Tuomas Isalo after a loss to the Los Angeles Lakers. That's the backdrop Morant was speaking from when he stood in front of reporters and talked about his new teammates unlocking parts of his game. He wasn't describing a lateral move, he was describing an escape hatch. By the time he was sent to Portland after months of trying to find a taker for his contract, which will pay him more than $87 million over the next 2 seasons, injuries and off-court issues had eroded his standing across the league. And it wasn't for lack of Memphis trying to move him quietly first. ESPN's Brian Windhorst said Morant couldn't be more available on the trade market, and the Grizzlies were struggling to find a team willing to trade for him. The Stein Line's Jake Fisher reported that the Sacramento Kings said no to a deal and would have required the Grizzlies to attach draft capital just to move him. Think about that for a second. Teams weren't just declining to give up value for a former All-Star. Memphis was being asked to pay other teams to take him. That's the value collapse. Morant referenced himself when reporters pushed him on his reputation. He didn't dodge it. Asked what he'd like cleared up, Morant said he thinks reporters already know the answer. His image, the idea that he's a bad guy, in his first public comments since the June trade. He kept going. "I'm Ja," he said. "I've done what I've done in the past, but it's been addressed and handled already. I don't see why, years later, that's still the topic when nothing's happened since. If I was that guy, y'all wouldn't be talking to me now." He also made a point of not burning the bridge on his way out. Morant expressed no ill will toward the Grizzlies, saying that Memphis will always be home for me, and noting he is still connected with many of his former teammates. Asked directly about how the city responded to the trade, he didn't flinch. "The reaction from Memphis was all love," Morant said, adding that he looks at any criticism as tough love from a family member, the same way actual family members treat him, and that he loves Memphis, the fans, and his old teammates. That framing matters because it's the exact opposite tone he took 2 minutes later when the conversation shifted to Portland. With Memphis, it was gratitude, loyalty, closure. With his new team, it was something closer to anticipation, almost restless. He wasn't just leaving one chapter behind, he was already predicting how the next one would play out, teammate by teammate, before he played a single regular season game alongside any of them. That's the piece that made his comments feel different from a standard, excited for a new opportunity press conference. Most traded players say the diplomatic thing and let the season answer the questions. Morant skipped that step. He told everyone, by name, what he expected to happen, and left the receipts sitting there in the transcript for the whole league to measure him against once the games actually start. Here's where it gets complicated, because Morant's confidence about unlocking his new teammates ran straight into a roster situation that a lot of people in Portland weren't thrilled about. Morant added to a logjam at point guard right now for Portland, with Drew Holiday, Damian Lillard, and Scoot Henderson also on the current roster. 4 players who all want the ball in their hands, on one 15-man roster with one center stage spot. The front office's answer to that problem, relayed through reporting, was to lean into position flexibility rather than trade anyone away. According to The Athletic's Jason Quick, the team had no plans of making any changes and believed all 4 guards could coexist, in large part because the team believes Holiday can alleviate the redundancy by playing him off the ball as a shooting guard or small forward. That explanation didn't land well with everybody. Portland columnist Bill Oram went on Sirius XM and didn't hold back. "I hate every single thing about it, Joe." Oram said, "Every single thing about it. I think it's a terrible trade and an affront to the fan base." He continued, adding that he thinks it's an insult to Damian Lillard. Oram's argument wasn't really about Morant's talent. It was about timing and about whose comeback season this was supposed to be. Lillard spent the season rehabbing a torn Achilles, the kind of injury that erases a year and tests a 35-year-old's patience for a rebuild. And instead of building a clean, settled backcourt for him to return to, the front office imported a third ball-dominant guard with his own list of complications, on top of a roster that already had Holiday and Henderson occupying that exact position. Oram put it plainly, read that way, insult isn't about anything Morant does on the court. It's about what the move says regarding whose timeline actually matters to ownership. And it wasn't an isolated complaint. Oram tied it to a longer pattern building around the franchise since the trade. While Lillard focused on recovering from his Achilles tear, the team had lost head coach Chauncey Billups to an FBI investigation, gone to the playoffs shorthanded, endured layoffs and cost-cutting, watched an assistant leave for Chicago, hired Nori, and now added Morant on top of it all, each defensible alone, but stacked together forming the pattern Oram was describing, with Lillard possibly walking into a bleaker situation than a single trade headline suggests. Fans picked up the same thread, just with less restraint. One fan called the four-guard plan elder abuse, joking that the team was trying to kill 50-year-old Jrue Holiday by making him guard 4 people at a time. But here's the thing, Lillard himself didn't seem to be reading it that way at all. His welcome video wasn't reluctant. It wasn't polite through gritted teeth. Lillard kept it short and sweet, but the message was loud and clear. He was welcoming Morant with open arms, and the 13-year veteran also indicated his eagerness to start working. That's a very different signal than a guy who feels insulted by the front office's roster math. The basketball logic behind pairing them isn't hard to follow either, even with the crowded backcourt. The answer could reside in a combination of Morant's playmaking and Lillard's elite three-point shooting. Portland finished 28th in three-point percentage last season, and Lillard, the franchise's all-time leader in made threes, is an obvious boost. Though coming off a major leg injury, he'll need to be gradually eased back into things. And that's where Morant steps in. Given his gravity and ability to create for others, despite past friction with a former coach over system and style. There's also the Scoot Henderson piece, which Morant addressed almost as directly as he addressed Lillard. Morant, just 26 years old, will play alongside veteran guards Lillard and Holiday, and he'll also be a mentor for Henderson, who, like Morant, is a former number 2 overall pick. 2 guards who entered the league carrying the exact same label. The electric undersized lead guard expected to be a franchise cornerstone, now sharing a locker room, one of them a few years further down that road than the other. So the backcourt situation that looked from the outside like a chaos experiment doomed to implode actually had 2 very different stories running through it depending on who you ask. The columnists and the fans saw a front office chasing splash over substance at the expense of a franchise legend's last competitive window. The players inside the building, Lillard leading the way, treated it like an opportunity to stack shot creation, passing, and shooting into one lineup and figure the minutes out later. Morant's own comments put him firmly in that second camp, and he said as much before a single practice had even been scheduled. This is the part of the story that got the least attention in the immediate aftermath of the trade, but it's arguably the most revealing piece of the entire saga, because it wasn't Morant talking about his new team. It was his new coach talking about him, describing a process that happened before anyone in Portland ever agreed to bring him in. Micah Nori didn't just accept the front office's evaluation and move on. He made calls. He told Morant the background he had on him, and that people had nothing but great things to say about him, not only as a player, but as a person and a teammate, that all his teammates love him. That's a coach essentially running a character reference check on a player with a well-documented suspension history and coming back with the opposite of what the public narrative suggested. Nori tied that directly to what he needed from Morant going forward, framing the entire relationship around accountability rather than talent alone. Jason Quick of The Athletic reported that Morant had promised to be at his best possible self in Portland, with Nori saying the way he was talking, the way he looked, the intent he had, you could just tell in his face that he missed basketball. And he assured them they were going to get the best job, that he was going to do all the right things. There's a piece of nostalgia mixed into Nori's read on Morant too, something that goes back further than the trade itself. Nori said the first time he saw Morant, he thought, "We need the Ja Morant that beat us 4-2, 5 years ago in the playoffs," referring to the 2022 first-round series against the Minnesota Timberwolves, where Nori had been an assistant coach. That's not a coach hedging his bets on a reclamation project. That's a coach who watched Morant up close at his absolute peak and is now betting his own reputation on getting that version back onto the floor. Nori also drew a hard line about how he planned to manage this differently than Morant's last locker room. Nori added that Morant has been healthy and expects him to be a key contributor next season as they look to break through in the playoffs, saying he's going to have an opportunity to play winning basketball again with a team that's ready and playoff proven, and that the conversations have been great. Not once did they talk about playing time or how they're going to use him. Compare that with the confrontation that got Morant suspended a game in Memphis over exactly that kind of dispute with his old coaching staff. Nori seems to be building the relationship in the opposite direction on purpose, and Morant's own account of his reception lines up with all of it. Asked about what he'd heard from teammates since the trade went through, he didn't hedge. He'd already spent real time with several of them in Vegas before camp had even opened, treating those conversations less like introductions and more like planning sessions for the season ahead. That's a different posture than a guy nervous about walking into a crowded, skeptical room. That's a guy who came in with the coach's endorsement already in hand and used it to skip straight past the getting to know you phase. Put those two threads together, Nori's vetting process turning up nothing but praise, and Morant's own comments about unlocking new parts of his game with Lillard, Holiday, and Avdija, and you get a version of this trade that reads very differently from the insult framing coming out of the fan base. Inside the building, according to every person who's actually spoken on the record, the read on Morant has been almost uniformly positive. The tension isn't about whether people like him. It's about whether four guards who all like each other can actually share one basketball without the results looking like a science experiment gone sideways. That tension is still sitting there, unresolved heading into the season. Nori bet his early read on a player he watched torch his own team in a playoff series years ago. Lillard bet his welcome video on a guy he's never actually played alongside. And Morant bet his own words, on the record, on chemistry nobody has actually tested yet in a live NBA game. So where does all of this leave Portland? And where does it leave Morant himself heading into a season that's already generated more headlines than most teams manage in an entire year? The financial reality is worth sitting with for a second because it shapes everything else. Grant will make $34.2 million in 2026-27 and has a $36.4 million player option in 2027-28, while Morant is owed $42.2 million in 2026-27 and $44.9 million in 2027-28 on the maximum rookie extension he signed in 2022, right after the best season of his career. That's not a throwaway swap. That's Portland committing real money to a player league executives were, months earlier, unwilling to trade for even at a discount. The national read on the deal, once the dust settled, landed somewhere between cautious and skeptical rather than outright hostile. The greater risk for the Trailblazers might be how their new acquisition fits over the long term. Even though they didn't have to surrender picks, don't expect a Morant extension soon, and instead wait to see if this move allows Morant to return to even a semblance of the stardom he once enjoyed in Memphis. It's not likely, but it's not impossible. That's about as measured as national analysis got. And it still left the door open. There's also a structural wrinkle that will shape how much of this unlocking talk can actually play out on the floor. Because Morant was acquired via the 125% trade exception, the Blazers are hard capped at the first apron, though they're still able to use their full non-taxpayer mid-level exception, the biannual exception, and a pair of smaller trade exceptions worth roughly minimum contracts. Translation: Portland's roster is basically locked in as is. Whatever chemistry Morant, Lillard, Holiday, Avdija, and Henderson build, they're going to have to build it with almost exactly the players already in the building. Even the front office's stated priority after the trade points toward keeping continuity rather than blowing it up further. Their first order of business was reportedly re-signing reserve center Robert Williams, a rim-running, shot-blocking big who remains one of the NBA's premier protectors, someone expected to mesh smoothly with Morant, though later reporting complicated even that plan. The Blazers were not expected to retain Williams. Jason Quick of The Athletic reported, meaning Morant may have come at an additional cost beyond the two players sent to Memphis. None of that has stopped the optimism from the two people, whose voices matter most in this story. Lillard's welcome message is still sitting on the team's social media, 4 words that fans have replayed obsessively since the day it dropped. Nori's read on Morant, built on calls to people who'd actually coached and played alongside him, still stands as the clearest counter to years of public skepticism. And Morant's own comments, the ones that kicked this entire conversation off, are still the loudest data point of all. A player who could have played it safe with generic gratitude, and instead chose to name his new teammates one by one and predict exactly how they'd change his game before a single possession had been played together. What's left is a season that will either confirm every word of it or expose how much of it was just optimism dressed up as a scouting report. 4 guards, 1 ball, a coach who bet his early evaluation on a 5-year-old playoff memory, and a franchise legend coming back from the worst injury of his career into a backcourt more crowded than anyone in Portland actually wanted. Morant said Lillard, Holiday, and Avdija would unlock parts of his game nobody had seen. Somewhere between opening night and the trade deadline, the league is going to find out whether he meant it, or whether the loudest thing about this trade was always going to be the words spoken about it in Las Vegas, months before the games that will actually decide